On this week's dose, we have Jack Kuveke, GP at Jabroni Capital, which is a fake venture capital firm that writes satire and gives commentary on the tech world.
Yeah, Jack had a more unconventional path into the world of venture than most we've ever talked to. Having been successful early on in crypto while he was at college, then dropping out and faking it till making it with a bunch of Eastern Europeans working on one of the largest ICOs at the time.
Yeah, an amazing story, which he gets into in the interview. But from there, we get to hear about how he eventually made his way into the startup world, working for an accelerator and then starting his own companies and raising venture capital.
Yeah, from there, he tells us about how he got into satirical venture capital writing and what he's learned about the media business and virality along the way, growing Jabroni Capital.
And we wrap up with some refreshing advice for the Pillgrims that may be looking to raise money for a startup or just wanting to get into the world of venture capital more broadly.
Yeah, it was awesome to have Jack on the pod and to take part in his lifelong goal of laughing as much as possible, which I know you and I can get behind and certainly try to live as much as we can. It was refreshing to have a laugh as much as we did from one of the guests. We hope you enjoy the interview, and here it is.
You see here, kid? You gotta just go for it. Don't think about what comes after or what came before. You just gotta bend your knees, take a deep breath, and jump.
This is Venture Pill, your weekly dose of startups and venture capital. We break down recent startups in the news and interview founders and investors to help you stay informed in the evolving world of venture. On this week's dose, we have Jack Kuveke, GP at Jabroni Capital, which is a fake venture capital firm that writes satire and gives commentary on the tech world. Jack, thanks for joining us. How's it going, man?
Living the dream, brother. Thanks for having me.
Of course, our pleasure. Appreciate you taking the time. Let's jump right into it. Starting with, we'd love to hear a little bit more about your early days in crypto and how that introduced you to the world of entrepreneurship at large.
Yeah. So kind of wacky. So back in my freshman year of college, like most idiots in their dorm room, I wanted to drop out and I needed something to do with my time. So I quickly discovered Bitcoin. And it was one of those places where it was like right place at the right time. You could basically be like the biggest idiot in the world and just make monopoly money. So I threw like whatever money I had, like $500, $1,000 into Bitcoin, bought, Bitcoin at $300, couple hundred Ethereum at $2, like again, right place at the right time. And then over the next couple months, I was just like day trading cryptos. I did not party. All I did was just spend my time trying to trade cryptocurrency and figure out how to make money. And it went from like, by the summer I had a couple $1,000. So I was like, my God, I'm a genius. I made 5x. And it's like with $3,000, I'm like literally Nostradamus out here. And so I ended up finding the first gaming cryptocurrency, and I knew a lot about gaming because I built popular Minecraft servers in high school. So I was like, oh, this is a cool application for crypto. And I reached out to the CMO and they ghosted me. But I just spent like the rest of the summer like debating neckbeard old men in web forums and being like, game credits is the future. This is amazing. And there was like a Slack channel with like 20 dudes in it. And I was just like ranting and raving about how cool this was. And lo and behold, in the fall, the CMO reached out to me and was like, hey, we'll make you the CMO of this cryptocurrency. I was like, hell yeah, I'm in. And so they put me in charge of marketing. Again, we had like to build their communities and run like press releases and stuff like that. And literally no one in communities. Over the next 9 months, it turned out I was really good at my job, even though I had really no clue what I was doing. And we grew communities of tens of thousands of people. It became like, went from like being like 10 cents a coin to 50 cents, $1, $2. And within 9 months, it hit like $6.50 a coin and was like a top 15 market cap back in 2017, 2018. It all came roundabout where they asked me to run an ICO for them. And I was like, for sure, I can run an ICO. And then have to like hurry home and Google what an ICO was. And lo and behold, I'm like one of two Americans on a team of like Eastern European and Russian men. And so we launched this ICO at the end of my sophomore year during finals week. Our site immediately crashes. Everything goes down. We're like hoping to raise $10 million because the largest ICO in the world at the time is Ethereum. We raised like $53 million basically overnight, become the largest ICO of all time. And all of a sudden I have monopoly money for a 19-year-old idiot at Syracuse University. So I dropped out of college, moved to Belgrade, Serbia, like anyone would do, and ended up running the marketing team and working for comms in this Serbian office for 6 months until it blew up in my face. And I came back a sadder, poorer, disgruntled and being a sued version of myself and by the leadership of this company, which I whistle blew against. So that's how I got into tech. So basically it was like the rock bottom for me. I had made several $1 million and lost several $1 million by the time I was 21. And I did not want to go. My parents like, go back to college, you idiot. You had I had a really good GPA at college. I just dropped out because I hated it. And they're like, you can go to Stanford. And I was like, fuck, I don't want to go to Stanford. I really, really don't want to go back to college. So Hail Mary, I applied to a startup accelerator and got in when I was 22. And when I applied to the accelerator, I was like, I don't have a company that's good enough to start. So I have to convince these people to give me a job. And then 2 months into the program, they asked me to run their program for them. And I ended up working at a startup accelerator for a little over a year. And that was how I ended up getting my foray into tech from crypto.
Yeah, we have to hear, are there any particular stories from going to Serbia? That's got to be a crazy 6 months to look back on.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely insane. There were a number of wild encounters. There was one moment, this is like the penultimate moment where I knew I was tremendously screwed. And we were having organizational management problems. We had raised $53 million. It was now worth billions because crypto had gone from being worth we raised 50,000 Ethereum, 10,000 Bitcoin when Bitcoin was $1,100. And now 3 months later, it was 20 grand a coin. So we had legitimate monopoly money at our disposal. And so the leadership at the time was like, you know what we should do? Build every product we can think of and just hire everyone in Serbia. And so literally it was just hundreds of people in this office building 15 new products when I got there. And I was like, oh no, I convinced 10,000 people to give us millions of dollars. I'm the face of this thing and I'm the only American on the team. This is going to go terribly. And so we're having lots of fights. There was at one point, our cryptocurrency was hacked. We were one of the only people to mitigate a 51% attack in history, slash $50 million, $100 million off our market cap in the span of seconds. I had to mitigate that and pull all-nighters with a team of Serbian men. But I think the craziest moment, to go back to my story, was the Russian leaders of this company came to us and pulled us into a boardroom one day. And they're like, guys, don't worry. We have a plan to fix everything. And me and the former founder of this currency, who's retired now and just an advisor, eyeballing each other in this boardroom, being like, okay, what's the plan? And they're like, we're going to sponsor the first concert from space. And I swear to God, and they had found some lunatic, and you can look up YouTube videos of this. Lady Gaga was doing interviews in 2013 for with some idiot had been I'm going to do a concert in space. Lady Gaga had signed up. Never going to happen, but convinced many, many other dumb people like the CEO of this company to give them tens of millions of dollars to try and shoot Lady Gaga into space. And that was it was at that moment that all the Serbians on the team were like, oh, we should just kill these guys. And that's the best solution. And so I fled back to the United States a couple months later in disarray, in fear of my own life, and it was very much a shit show. So that was probably the craziest moment among many, and that was very wild.
You have lived in a crazy life at such a young age. That is unbelievable, and I can't help but laugh. This you talking about crypto in the 2017-18 timeline reminds me of myself, similar to you. Scraped together whatever summer money, internship money I could get back at those times and threw it into Bitcoin and Ethereum and whatever other shit coins were pumping at the time. And similarly, my hundreds of dollars became thousands of dollars. And I thought I was the richest, smartest person in the world. Led to several Thanksgiving fights with my parents about why they should invest or why, them thinking I'm just throwing money at the wall, which is so funny. And so you have a crazy experience to try to synthesize it, everything you alluded to. You've dabbled in a lot: community building, fundraising, coaching. If you could just continue this amazing story into how, your career and how that led you into starting at Jabroni Capital.
Yeah. So after, like I said, like I ended up working at the startup accelerator, which was like my first foray into venture capital. I'd raised money, but it was like a totally different kind of fundraising. And at this accelerator, I like got to like sit in like investment committees and be on the other side of venture. And I realized kind of how arbitrary it was. Like I knew I wanted to be more of an entrepreneur. I took this job because I didn't have something I wanted to start. And so through the experience of this accelerator, I was like, oh, like people are just like the worst ideas often were the ones getting funding, and like the companies that didn't get the money were almost always the ones that went on to raise like $10 million like a year later, and they are always missing out. And I was like, this. I kind of developed this like kind of cynical view, but it also gave me an idea of like, what do these people want to hear in order to convince them to give you money? And so I ended up quitting that. I started a couple of companies in between. I raised a couple $1 million for startups and like went through the whole like venture backed startup thing and put together competitive fundraisers. And then I ended up just like consulting on the side for startups for a couple of years and helping people raise money, and have helped startups, typically pre-seed and seed, raise over $100 million at this point. And so it's like through the experience of like working accelerator, running my own startups, like going from like not knowing anyone to convincing like a GP at A16Z to get on the phone with me off of a Twitter DM, that like just you started to see like the wackiness of this industry, and you see all of like the crazy stupid patterns that people think like, we're starting a fund that just has high conviction and invests on founders at the bleeding edge of technology. And they invest in all of the same shit that everyone else in the industry invests in. And it's like the same funding announcement for like, I'm announcing my new fund today. I even wrote about my newsletter, and it's like, you could copy paste 50,000 fund announcements and they would be like identical to one another. So I think all of those experiences led me to start just like I did a satire post about a fund randomly called Jabroni Capital on LinkedIn one day, and it immediately went viral. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to do this now. Like I'm an opportunist, and like whenever opportunity and momentum comes, I just run at it. It's full steam ahead. But you don't know, like I'll have like 6 months of deadness and being like, I can't get a job. I'm going to be homeless. This is terrible. And then like, I'll do something, it'll go viral, and then I'll just chase that for a couple of years. And so Jabroni Capital kind of just happened one time. I wrote something satirical about being like a stupid VC, and immediately went viral. And then I launched a newsletter that day, and then have since just repeatedly put out content in newsletters twice a week since then. And, you know, it's grown, you know, thousands upon thousands of subscribers, almost 20,000 followers. And I'm just trying to like run it as like far as I can and build this like cool niche media business that appeals to like investors, startup founders, and anyone that's in the tech community.
That's awesome. Yeah, we wanted to hear a little bit more, kind of nerd out on the content side of things for a bit. Like, what's that been like growing? We're in the game, and we know it's just hard. It sometimes comes down to consistency, but you clearly kind of feel out what can go viral and get a sense for that virality. What's that been like with LinkedIn, with the newsletter, and elsewhere?
Yeah. So what I found is LinkedIn is starved of content and obviously super boring. And so for me, it's been really easy to get engagement. I think my content's good, but I also think that like the platform appeals to it to some degree, where it's just so dead and so few people put out like anything that just isn't like mindless garbage, quite frankly, and just like brain dead wisdom. Like I always used to joke, like people would just put out like, you should be on time, and then it'll be like 50,000 likes on LinkedIn, and you're like, I would just like jump off of a roof right now if I could. And so I think that has been a competitive advantage. And so my whole thought is I stopped doing like anything serious. I only put out stuff that's satire. And my strategy has been to just find posts or like styles where people write and I want to trick 30% of readers into thinking I'm serious, and then they'll hate me. 70% will be on the inside. And it's like that mix causes virality on LinkedIn really well, but it has to be nuanced, and you have to see the patterns of behavior that people are doing and then mock them in a kind of hyperbolistic way, but just enough where like a large percentage of people think you're serious. And then when the people who think you're serious realize it's a joke, 90% of them are like, I'm following this guy from there on out. And then you win those people over as fans. Or they hate you and block you, which is like 10 or 15% of the time, but like fair game. That's also good for engagement. So it's a little interesting. So LinkedIn has been super surefire. It's it's been really good to me. I get banned every once in a while, to be honest. And like, I will definitely get permanently banned within like the next year or two. So like starting to look at other platforms. But I think the biggest challenge and the thing I'm still working on is how to convert subscribers from social media. That's the hardest thing. And so they change the algorithm constantly. Like you used to be able to promote your newsletter and comments. That didn't work. Most people grow newsletters off of ads. And I write a satire newsletter, and that doesn't really appeal to ads. Like ads are something to be like, you'll learn 10 AI tools that'll help you like save money at your job. That'll convert in an ad. But to be like, I tell Jake jokes in a newsletter and make fun of, dumbass VCs, and people will be like, why should I join? So it's something that has to grow organically. So figuring out how to convince people to refer and just like doing banger content after banger content where people actually like grow the audience organically and post about you on the internet is the name of the game. And it feels like I'm just figuring that out now and how to incentivize people. But I think the answer for that is just like, honestly, consistency. Like you kind of just have to write a lot. You have to consistently put things out twice a week, and it has to be undeniably good. And if you do that, then you can grow something that's comedic and satire related. But if I just am bad, like people are not going to share it and I'm going to be screwed. Like I think most newsletters can get away with being bad because there's like a specific niche value, and they can use like the CAC to LTV ratio of advertisements on newsletters to grow. I can really only grow organically, which is great for engagement and like open rates and click rates, and like overall, like the power of the newsletter is like really surprising, even with only, a couple thousand subscribers, like 3,000 or 4,000 subs right now. But it still is just more, it has to be organic, and just like, you got to do viral content to grow it, which that's hard.
Yeah, no, I mean, as content creators, Sam and I are aware of the difficulties with going viral. Sounds like you're, off to a great start though. And I imagine for someone who essentially had to flee for their life from Serbia, being kicked off of LinkedIn is not too scary for you. No. But it sounds like it's a masterful balance you have to strike between like keeping it, not being too blatantly unserious about it, but just serious enough, kind of tight roping that blend of serious but also satire, which for sure, tip of the cap, like sounds like you've struck a very specific chord with an audience.
And it's funny because a lot of people, I think the last thing I'll say there is most satire accounts in this space are anonymous. Another thing that's helped is people think I'm a fake person, and when they figure out I'm real, they're like, no way. Like I've met a lot of my audience at this point, and they're like, I legitimately thought this was not a real person, and you just pulled like a photo off the internet to do this. So like, that's pretty legit. And I'm like, yeah. So I think that also helped me a lot.
Yeah, and there's an extra layer of humor in the fact that you are a certified Adam Newman lookalike. Just like
for sure.
It's a perfect addition to it. Taking a step back, or actually looking a little further down the line, would love to hear your thoughts on what the future holds for you and Jabroni. What essentially would make you look back on this 10 years from now and say that, hey, that was a huge success. I'm proud of the work I put in.
Yeah. For me, I look at success in form of two things. One, that I can I can make an amount of money regularly from this where I can tell people to fuck off whenever I want, quite frankly. Like, that's really the most important thing. I've had that luxury at most points in my career, but I want to continue having that for the rest of my life. So for me, that's one. The second thing is just like having a lot of fun. Like, I laugh a lot doing this, and I have moments where I'm just like, I got invited to go be a panelist at a pitch competition, and no one told them I was a fake VC. And so I got to just like ask the most asinine questions, and people were like, and like, so just, I guess, having these really fun moments where I can like just really just focus on having fun and make, enough money to be set for the rest of my life. I think that's the good. I don't need to be a billionaire. I had those ambitions when I was like a dumb 18-year-old, 19-year-old. Now I'm just like, I just need fuck you money. And I just to laugh as much as possible and to like constantly be doing crazier and crazier things. Like, I want another Serbia experience under my belt. Like, I want to be able to like go to the YC demo day on mushrooms and like record the whole thing and go to viral for doing that. Like, I want to just do really funny, dumb things and look back and be like, dude, you're going to be dead for a long time. I'm really glad you laughed the entire way and you made money on top of that. Like, power to you. High five.
Love that. Love that. Yeah. It's awesome as you're doing with Jabroni. You know this. It's a fresh take from the normal stuff you see on LinkedIn or podcasts that you listen to. So respect that you're just fully yourself and lean fully into that.
And so moving on here as we get towards wrapping up this awesome interview with you, Jack, would love to hear, without giving away everything for free or, all of your secret sauce, you've already shared so much, which we appreciate. What's some of the best advice you have for Pillgrims that might be looking to raise capital for their startup, or more broadly for those just looking to crack into the world of venture at large?
Yeah, I've said this a couple times. I think there's two things that determine now who's going to raise money. One, the people that are going to raise money, I know almost right away. Like, they're going to raise money with or without me. Like, they're basically paying me to speed things up and to just like, hey, I want to get answers on this faster. I want to be able to run stuff by someone, and I'm paying for that luxury. But they're going to raise money regardless. And the reasons they will is there's two things I've found. One, they know what to say. They know how to say what other people want to hear. And that's the most, like, most people that I approach from a startup fundraising perspective, like, they always pitch things the way they want to hear things. And like, it's not about you. There's a certain ethos and narrative in this startup and VC world that convinces people to give you money. And there's patterns that these people follow. The same sort of pitches continue to receive money. They follow the same sort of logic and pattern matching against other success cases. And founders who are really good at relaying those narratives are almost always the ones that are able to raise money. And the second thing is they have good networks. And most people that come to me that struggle to raise money, they start networking a month before they raise. So anyone that decides to go out and fundraise, if you decided like, hey, in a year from now, I'm going to fundraise, and you met 3 venture-backed founders a week for the next year, you would have a leg up on 99.9% of people, because fundraising is not meritocracy, it's nepotism at the pre-seed and seed stage. So it's like, who can story tell, but who has a lot of people that can make introductions for them. And you may still have to do cold outreach, but like, the more you network for the longer period of time up until you raise, you will beat people. And it's always the people who are like, yeah, I need to meet 50 new founders in the next month in order to get intros for my fundraise that I hope to close in September. And I'm like, this is going to be rough, because you have to compete against people who've been intentionally networking for a long period of time. And it's not about like, where you win is like smoking a joint with a venture-backed founder on the street. Like, that's the kind of person who wants to help you. It's not some guy who gets on a Zoom call and is like, you know what, I really like you, and I'm going to make an introduction right now to like Mark Andreessen. It's like, no, like, the dude you hung out with and got drunk with, or like played a board game with and had an authentic, cool experience, that person's going to want to help you. And so if you can do that over a longer period of time in advance of raising money, you'll be able to compete. But people who don't will really have to struggle. And I've struggled, but it's just way easier if you spend more time networking for a longer period of time, and do it the authentic kind of networking, not the bullshit trying to get an intro as quickly as possible sort of thing.
That's great advice, Jack. You think of other creative ways to reach out to someone. It could be within something like a podcast too, like getting creative online, establishing a connection through giving something and getting, not just asking for something in return right away. So I like the way you put it, though. It's just those authentic connections, getting out in person and not just doing Zoom calls. So I don't think we've actually heard that put that way before. We asked that question to every guest we have on the pod. So I appreciate you sharing there.
There's one person I think did a really, really good job breaking this down. A founder called Andrew Rea, REA. He did a bunch of resources and blogs talking about how he broke into venture. And he talks a lot about the networking component, how he did it over a long period of time. That dude literally just was as useful as possible to me, like, for a year and a half. And then after a year and a half of being like literally the man and like genuinely having super unique like thoughts about how to live your life and build companies and stuff, then he raised money for something. And it was no surprise he got 200 meetings, because he had just been the man and valuable to as many people as he could for a long period of time.
Yeah. I
actually remember his blog. He's great.
I actually remember seeing him on Twitter back in the day. Yeah, he grew an audience. That's cool that you mentioned him. Awesome, dude. Well, it's been great having you on. We want to make sure to plug you. So if there's anywhere or any way you want people to get in touch with you, if it's on LinkedIn, just let people know what's the best way to keep up with what you're doing.
Yeah, if you want to find me, jabronicapital.com for the newsletter. It's a lot of fun. You will laugh or hate me. It's pretty much polarizing either way, but that's fine. And then just Jack Kuveke, Kuveke, at basically all forms on social media.
Awesome, Jack. Yeah, this was fun. Shout out to Will, too, your partner over there, for helping us put this together.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening. Join us next week for another dose of startups and venture capital. And as always, we appreciate our pilgrims spreading the word about the show. Share with your friends and help someone else make the pilgrimage. See you next time.
She told me that she only bumps my music when she's lonely. Thinks my vibe's a little low-key, okie dokie, that's alright, but wait, I don't know how to do things different.